Hey guys, tonight we drift into the hot hush of the Judean wilderness. The rocks are sun-bleached and cracked, the air so dry it clings to your throat like linen gauze. You step over brittle brush and gritty soil, your sandals half melted from the heat. And in the middle of it all, just barely clinging to life under a scruffy desert bush, is a man who just watched fire fall from the sky. That man is Elijah. And he is not okay. He's sprawled under a broom tree, which, let's be honest, isn't much of a tree. More like a defiant shrub with delusions of grandeur, thin branches, little tufts of greenish-grey leaves, and about as much shade as a hat with holes. And yet here he is, Elijah, prophet extraordinaire, curled up in the dust, asking God to please let him die because he just cannot anymore. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing our sleepy little community stretch across time zones. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint into the sun and edge closer to Elijah. He doesn't move. His beard is full of twigs, and his eyes are swollen from weeping or possibly just dust. He looks like someone who just finished a group project alone and found out the others still got credit. And it's fair, really. Less than 24 hours ago, Elijah stood on Mount Carmel with enough confidence to soak an altar in water before calling on God to light it. Fire fell from heaven, literally, and proved that the Lord was not just awake, but in the mood for drama. The prophets of Baal, gone. The people of Israel, momentarily impressed. Elijah, victorious, briefly. But here's the twist. Instead of basking in the glow of a miracle, Elijah is now running for his life. Queen Jezebel, who didn't take kindly to the whole "your gods are fake and also exploded" situation, has sent word that Elijah will be very dead by tomorrow. No subtlety, no politics, just a royal hit job. So Elijah flees. He leaves behind his servant. He travels alone into the wilderness, and now, here, you find him, collapsed beneath a broom tree, whispering the kind of prayer you only say when you've hit absolute emotional sandpaper. I've had enough. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. A real mood. Theologians still debate whether Elijah's breakdown is a failure of faith, a holy burnout, or simply the result of skipping too many meals and crying in the sun. But in this moment, it doesn't really matter. What matters is the realism. Even prophets, especially prophets, can get tired, and not just physically tired, existentially tired. Prophet-level tired. You sit down next to him, brush a pebble from your sandal, and wonder how a man can go from heavenly fire to desert despair in a single chapter. Maybe you've been there, standing tall one day, curled up under metaphorical foliage the next. The broom tree, by the way, isn't just randomly chosen. Ancient Bedouins prized it for its charcoal. Some say it produced the hottest burning firewood in the region. Its roots stretch deep to find water, making it a tenacious survivor in barren landscapes. Not the most comfortable napping spot, but if you're going to have a meltdown in the desert, it's as symbolic as it is scratchy. And the location. Elijah wandered a day's journey into the wilderness, which isn't just far. It's isolation with intent. In biblical geography, that kind of phrasing usually means he wanted to get away from literally everything. There's something painfully human about this prophet's retreat. No audience, no miracles, no more confrontations, just raw honesty. In the shade of a nearly leafless shrub, you watch as Elijah folds his arms under his head and closes his eyes. His breath slows. The desert heat buzzes with quiet. A cricket chirps nearby, brave soul, and you find yourself wondering how long he plans to stay here. But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the better question is how long he needs to out. Here, stripped of crowds and callings and royal threats, Elijah is just a man with sore feet and a heart full of fear. And instead of divine lightning or heavenly rebukes, something else is about to happen. But not yet. For now it's just you and him, lying in the dust, surrounded by silence so complete it hums. And maybe that's the most sacred part of all, because even holy men get tired. Even the fire-calling, altar-drenching, king-defying prophets need to fall apart sometimes. And in this story, God doesn't rush in with fury or sermons. He lets Elijah rest. No commands, no expectations, just sleep. You lie down too, pressing. Your back against the sandy earth. The wind brushes lightly over your face. Somewhere in the distance, a raven caws. Not delivering sandwiches this time, probably just being dramatic. Still, you wonder if it remembers him, and as the heat of the day begins to soften and the long shadows stretch across the wilderness floor, you start to understand. Even in this dusty exhaustion, there is grace. The broom tree doesn't offer much. It's less oasis and more bush that tried. You crack one eye open and squint at its wiry branches, more skeletal than leafy. A plant that looks like it survived a rough semester. The shade is patchy at best, just enough to make a vague suggestion of coolness, like someone holding up a lace curtain between you and the sun. Still, Elijah hasn't moved. He's curled up tight, one hand under his head, the other resting limp in the sand. His shoulders rise and fall in a rhythm that says, "Please don't talk to me until I've had 12 more hours of silence." The breeze shifts, dry as old scroll parchment. It carries that familiar smell of sun-baked earth and faint, bitter shrub. You stretch your legs, careful not to kick any sacred prophets, and study the landscape. Nothing moves. No trees, no animals, not even a buzz from a desert beetle. The world is paused, holding its breath around this one weary man and his voluntary time out under a glorified tumbleweed. And you wonder, why here? Of all the places Elijah could collapse in exhaustion, why a broom tree? Turns out, the broom tree, retem for those who enjoy botanical side quests, is one of the few plants in the Negev wilderness sturdy enough to survive on almost nothing. Ancient travelers sometimes buried themselves in the sand under its branches for shelter, though shelter might be overstating it. Really, it's more of a moral support shrub, and yet it grows, perseveres, reaches its awkward arms to the sky and declares, "I'm doing my best," which feels weirdly on theme. Theologians still debate whether the broom tree is symbolic of refuge or of Elijah's total isolation, or of Israel's spiritual barrenness, or maybe it's just where his legs gave out. Sometimes a bush is just a bush. Still, it's hard to ignore the poetry of it. You glance at Elijah. He hasn't stirred. Not a groan, not a mumble, just dust-coated sleep and the occasional twitch of a foot, and not the kind of nap you take because you're bored either. This is deep, drained, can't keep your eyes open sleep. Burnout sleep, Elijah's. Entire ministry has been uphill, calling out corrupt kings, hiding from assassins, speaking hard truths no one wants to hear, living alone in a cave while birds bring him meat. That last one sounds fun, until you consider the hygiene situation. He's been a prophet on the run for most of his career, and now, after one of the biggest miracles in the Old Testament, he doesn't feel triumphant. He feels empty, and it hits you. Sometimes it's not the storm that knocks you down, it's the calm afterward. That weird, disorienting crash when the adrenaline stops, and all that's left is a body too tired to stand, and a soul too sore to care. You shift, trying to get comfortable. The ground is uneven, and there's a pointy rock underneath your back. But somehow, it fits the mood. Elijah's robes are dust-caked and faded, his sandals worn through at the heel. He looks like someone who tried to outrun his own burnout and tripped over it instead. And there's something incredibly human about that. We tend to picture prophets as marble statues, stoic, unshakable, divinely energized. But Elijah here, face down, in the wilderness, proves otherwise. He's not glowing with holiness. He's sweating, crying, and borderline dehydrated. You lean your head against the nearest branch, carefully, because broom trees do not believe in comfort, and close your eyes. For a moment, you try to imagine what it would have felt like to be him. You've just faced down 450 prophets of Baal and watched them dance themselves dizzy to no avail. You've built an altar, soaked it in water, and called down fire from heaven. You've shown the people who's truly in charge. It's a spiritual high, sure, but now Jezebel wants your head, and the fear creeps in faster than the glory ever did. So you run. And you keep running, and then when your strength finally gives out, you collapse beneath the only thing that looks remotely like shelter. You whisper, "I'm done." And God says nothing. Not yet. There's a strange kind of holiness in that silence. Not judgment, not a lecture, just stillness, letting Elijah breathe, letting the prophet for once just be a man. You open your eyes. A single bee buzzes overhead and quickly thinks better of it. The sky is pale blue and stretched too wide. Your limbs feel heavy, your thoughts slow. Somewhere, a tiny lizard darts between stones. You watch it zigzag in the dust and disappear under a rock. Even the reptiles know when to hide from the heat. You glance again at the prophet. He's still asleep, jaw slack, hair wild, one sandal halfway off. He looks ridiculous. He looks exhausted. He looks like the kind of holy man who accidentally slept through his own revival meeting. And yet, you don't laugh. You don't pity him. You understand. Because sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is take a nap under a terrible shrub. No visions, no revelations, just a moment of full permission to fall apart. You breathe in, you breathe out. The wind sighs, the sand shifts, and in the distance, barely audible, something stirs. Not yet a voice, not yet a miracle, but the beginning of something. Still, Elijah sleeps on, and maybe you do too. The sunlight starts to tilt just a little. Still bright, still punishing, but with that late afternoon tone that hints the desert might eventually cool off. Maybe, someday, you sit in the same position, half slumped under this tragically ambitious broom tree beside a prophet who hasn't moved in hours. Elijah's chest rises and falls, slow and deep, the rhythm of someone finally safe enough to let go. And then it happens. The gentle sound of footsteps, not crunching, not stomping, just a sort of effortless hush against the sand. You look up, blinking through the haze. And there, with zero fanfare and the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need a dramatic entrance, is an angel. No wings, no harp, no spotlight from the sky, just a figure, somehow glowing without glowing, with sleeves rolled up and an apron that smells faintly of roasted grain and, wait, is that cake? The angel kneels next to Elijah, like this is the most natural thing in the world. No shouting, no trumpet, just a tap on the shoulder and a soft voice. Get up and eat. You blink again. Eat? Sure enough, there by Elijah's head, like some divine room service delivery in the middle of nowhere, is a little cake of hot coals and a jar of water. It's not much, definitely not a feast, but it smells good, warm and earthy, and oddly comforting, like the kind of snack a grandmother prophet might have made for Sabbath mornings. You glance at Elijah. He stirs, slowly, like a boulder that's thinking about rolling downhill, but isn't quite sure it's worth the effort. His eyes open just a sliver. He sees the food, he sees the angel, and then, without a word, he eats. The theologians still debate what kind of cake this was. Some say it was a type of yuga, a simple flatbread baked directly on coals. Others think it may have been a grain cake mixed with oil and honey, desert energy food for the soul. One scholar even speculated it might have had figs. Bold move, considering fig cakes are chewy and require significant motivation, which Elijah did not have. Whatever it was, he eats it, every bite, drinks the water, and then, classic prophet move, he lies back down and goes straight back to sleep. And the angel just watches. There's no hurry, no, okay buddy, now let's get going, just silence, rest, time. You feel a little stunned, to be honest. Of all the ways God could respond to Elijah's breakdown, he chooses this: a nap, a snack, a gentle touch on the shoulder. It's not the burning bush kind of moment. It's not the thunder and lightning at Mount Sinai. It's tenderness, unforced, unrushed. You lean back against the broom tree and whisper, "Same," because deep down, you know this moment isn't just for Elijah. It's for anyone who's ever been done, who's ever sat under life's worst excuse for a tree and said, "I can't anymore," and God doesn't respond with anger or commands or theological charts. He sends lunch. You wonder how many times God has done this for people without the full angelic reveal. A warm meal that shows up when you're on the edge. A quiet friend who hands you tea. The strange sense that someone sees you, even when you're a mess under a desert shrub. You look over. Elijah's already snoring again, loudly, like a man who's been holding the weight of a nation and finally put it down long enough to dream. You think about nudging him to ask what angel cake tastes like, but something tells you the answer would just be dusty and blessed. You stretch your legs out again. A gentle breeze picks up, cooler this time, brushing the sweat off your skin. For a moment you forget how harsh the desert is. The wilderness feels quiet, kind even, like it's rooting for you in its own weird way, and you realize God didn't tell Elijah to pray harder. He didn't say, "Where's your faith?" He didn't lecture or scold or even quote scripture. He just showed up in the quiet. With food, you close your eyes again and let that settle in. That sometimes the holiest help comes without a sermon. And maybe, just maybe, there's a lesson in that for the rest of us too. Because when your spirit is brittle and your soul's on empty, heaven doesn't always arrive with trumpets. Sometimes it brings cake. The second nap might be even deeper than the first. Elijah is fully sprawled now, one arm flung over his face like he's blocking out the cares of the world, which, honestly, he kind of is. The sand has settled into the folds of his robe, the edges of his beard are dusty, and there's a crumb of coal-baked cake stuck to his cheek. You don't have the heart to brush it off. There's something sacred about this moment. Not in the usual mountaintop voice of God way. No thunder, no smoke, just a nap. The kind where your bones finally get quiet. The kind that only arrives when you've cried out everything you had and there's nothing left but sleep. And then, once again, those footsteps return. The angel's back. Same quiet grace. No clipboard, no flaming sword. Just a soft presence that seems to hum with patient kindness. You barely notice the moment Elijah is stirred again. "Get up and eat," the angel says, just as gentle as before. "Or the journey will be too much for you." That line settles in your ears like a lullaby wrapped in prophecy. The journey will be too much for you, which is maybe the most honest thing anyone's ever said to a prophet. Because let's face it, Elijah's journey isn't over. Not even close. There's still a mountain to climb, a God to encounter, a legacy to be handed down. But right now, he can't even lace his sandals properly, and heaven doesn't expect him to. That's the miracle no one preaches on. Not the fire from the sky, not the parting clouds or whirlwind chariots, but this, a second snack. Because God knew the first wasn't enough. You blink at the meal. It's the same as before. A cake baked on hot stones, a jar of water. Still simple, still sacred, still exactly what he needs. Elijah sits up this time. He's a bit more awake, barely. His hair is matted and wild in that "I've been emotionally obliterated" kind of way, and there's sand stuck to the side of his face, but he eats, slowly, reverently, like every bite is reminding his body it's allowed to keep going. Theologians still debate what this journey referred to. Some say it's a literal 40-day trek to Mount Horeb. Others think it symbolizes the internal pilgrimage, the unraveling of burnout, the slow rediscovery of purpose. Either way, the message is clear. You can't walk it on fumes. You glance at the angel, expecting them to vanish like divine messengers do in stories. But they linger, watchful, maybe even proud. There's something deeply non-anxious about their presence, like they already know Elijah is going to make it. But they're not rushing him, and you can't help but wonder how many people give up not because they're weak, but because no one ever handed them a second cake. Not encouragement, not rebuke, just something warm, something needed, something that says, I see your limits and I'm not mad about them. You watch Elijah finish the last bite, then drain the water in one long pull. He wipes his mouth on his sleeve. Zero etiquette, 100% survival. His face isn't exactly joyful yet, but the hopeless slack is gone. Something's returning behind the eyes. Maybe it's resolve, maybe just enough strength to stand. Either way, he gets up, wobbly at first. You rise beside him, brushing off. Your own clothes like you were somehow invited to this wilderness recovery retreat. The sun's lower now, casting long golden lines across the hills. The shadows of both broom tree and prophet stretch eastward like they're pointing the way. Forward. And here's where things shift. Elijah looks around, not with panic but with purpose. Like someone remembering he's still in a story, that his chapter hasn't ended just because he fell apart in the middle of it. There's no big speech, no dramatic music cue, just the simple fact. He begins to walk toward Horeb, toward the mountain of God, toward whatever happens next. It's going to take him 40 days, which is quite a long time to think. Long enough for your soul to simmer, long enough for grief to unfold itself, long enough for one foot in front of the other to turn into healing. You take one last glance at the broom tree. It's still awkward, still scraggly, still more metaphor than shade. But now it's holy, because under that wiry, stubborn bush a prophet collapsed, and he was met not with judgment, but with nourishment and rest and a second chance. You begin walking too, slowly, matching Elijah's pace. The desert is vast and quiet. Each step kicks up a little puff of dust, soft and rhythmical, like a heartbeat syncing with hope again. You don't know what's waiting on the mountain, not yet. But for the first time, it doesn't feel impossible, because heaven is not in a hurry, and neither are you. The desert stretches before you like an ancient sigh. Each footstep crunches softly beneath Elijah's sandals, and you trail just behind him, your own steps falling into rhythm with his. 40 days, that's what lies ahead, and not the fun kind. Of 40 days, with tents and worship music and grilled fish by the Sea of Galilee. No, this is the I hope you like dust kind of pilgrimage. And yet, there's something peaceful about it. The heat still presses in like a sleepy animal, but the edge of it has dulled. Elijah doesn't speak much. He walks like someone who's still half exhausted and half curious, and maybe that's enough to move forward. This is where you start to notice the strange math of recovery. See, Elijah's not fixed. He's not suddenly beaming with confidence or quoting scripture with sparkly-eyed zeal. He's not even sure why he's walking, but he is walking, and that, apparently, is enough. Some scholars have spent pages arguing whether this 40 days was a symbolic number, a callback to Israel's wilderness years, to Moses on Sinai, to all the other divine countdowns scattered across Scripture. Others think it's literal, a reminder that even prophets need over a month to get their strength back. Either way, you're on this dusty path with a man who once called down fire from heaven and now mostly just mutters to himself about how long this walk is. Progress, right? The landscape changes slowly. One day it's all cracked earth and stubborn bushes. Another day it's rocky cliffs and bones bleached by sun. You pass through wadis, dry riverbeds that once carried flash floods, and Elijah seems to know where to step without thinking. Like some ancient memory is guiding his feet. You wish you had that same GPS. One afternoon, as the sun droops heavy in the sky, Elijah stops and leans against a rock. He says nothing for a long time. Then, out of nowhere, "I've been very zealous." It's the start of a rant. You can feel it coming. "I've done everything right," he mumbles. "Tore down idols, spoke the truth, faced down kings. But now, I'm alone." You don't interrupt. "Just listen. They've torn down your altars," he says, voice cracking. "Killed the prophets. I'm the last one." You stare at the desert horizon, wondering how many other prophets whispered this exact thing to the wind, feeling like they were the final one standing. It's a lonely thought, and here's the twist. Theologians still debate whether Elijah was right. Was he really the last prophet, or did despair narrow his vision? Some say Obadiah hid 100 prophets in a cave not long before. Others suggest Elijah meant something deeper. He wasn't talking census numbers, but isolation. That bitter ache of doing everything right and still ending up under a broom tree. Whatever the truth is, Elijah believes it. That's the point. He feels alone, abandoned, wrung out, and God doesn't argue. Not yet. You both keep walking. There's a strange comfort in that even when your facts are fuzzy and your theology frayed, heaven doesn't throw a lightning bolt your way. It just lets you walk it out, one slow, aching step at a time. Some nights, you sleep under stars so clear they look like someone polished the sky. Other nights, you huddle in caves, listening to wild animals howl and wondering if dinner was supposed to be that bitter. Elijah sleeps like a man still caught between grief and grit, restless but not crushed. By day 20, you notice he's stopped muttering so much. By day 30, his pace steadies. By day 35, you catch him humming, badly, and off-key, but still. It's something. And then, as the 40th day rises, with a pink smear of sunrise over the rocks, you see it. The mountain, Mount Horeb, the same place where Moses once met God in smoke and flame. The mountain of memory, of covenant, of history so thick it might as well be carved into the stone itself. Elijah stops and stares. His beard moves, a little in the breeze. You both say nothing. There's a reverence in the air, like the mountain is watching you back. You don't rush the moment. You just breathe it in. He made it. You made it. And now something is waiting. But not yet. Elijah doesn't climb right away. He turns to a nearby cave, carved into the mountainside like a waiting whisper, and steps inside. It's dark, cool, smells like ancient dust and the kind of stillness that echoes your heartbeat back to you. And there in the quiet, Elijah curls up against the wall. No fire, no prayer, just rest again. Because sometimes even reaching the mountain doesn't mean the journey's over. Sometimes you get to the sacred place and still need a nap. You settle beside him. Somewhere outside, the wind picks up. The mountain shivers with anticipation, but not yet. Tonight is for breath, for rest, for prophets who made it through the desert by eating cake and taking naps, and for those who are still figuring it out. Morning comes slowly inside the cave. No trumpets, no sunrise fanfare, just a soft flicker of light on the stone floor and the sound of Elijah shifting under his worn cloak, bones creaking like old furniture. You stretch too, quietly, trying not to disturb the sacred silence of someone who just walked 40 days to sit still. And then, from the stillness, a question echoes into the cave. What are you doing here, Elijah? No thunder, no divine introduction, just the question, plain, soft, startling in its simplicity. You freeze. Elijah doesn't respond at first. Maybe he's still waking up. Maybe he's deciding how honest to be. Eventually, he sits up and rubs, his eyes like a kid who's been asked to explain why he drew on the walls. I've been very zealous for the Lord, he begins, his voice still hoarse from silence and soot. You recognize the speech. It's the same lament he mumbled on the desert trail. They've torn down your altars, killed your prophets. I'm the only one left, and they're trying to kill me too. He says it like someone reciting the truth he's clung to, even if it's warped from wear and tear. He's not shouting, not angry, just tired. Deeply, achingly tired. And God doesn't interrupt him, which is a bit of a shock, honestly. If this were a different kind of story, this is where the divine lecture might start. A booming voice, a reminder of who's in charge, a fiery rebuke for forgetting the big picture. Instead, Elijah gets a field trip, "Go out," the voice says, "and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." That phrase right there, it makes your spine tingle. Not in a scary way, just in that you're about to witness something you weren't supposed to survive kind of way. Theologians still debate what this moment really was. Was it a vision? A dream? A literal divine appearance? Or just the sacred unfolding in silence? Whatever it is, Elijah doesn't jump up right away. He stays seated in the cave's mouth, looking out, and then things start to happen. First comes the wind, not a breeze, not a gentle whoosh. This is a shattering wind. It howls across the rocks, with the fury of a storm that's been holding its breath for centuries. Stones crack, dust flies. The whole mountain seems to lean sideways under its force. You squint against the gale, clutching your cloak as bits of wilderness try to rearrange your hairstyle. But God isn't in the wind. Then, an earthquake. The ground beneath you growls, shifts, throws up sharp jolts that rattle your teeth and tumble a few unfortunate goats down the slope. The mountain groans like it's remembering something painful, but God isn't in the earthquake. And just as your nerves start to rebuild themselves, fire, not metaphorical fire, not a warm glow of inspiration, actual fire. It dances across the rocks with hungry fingers, searing heat and golden light that burns brighter than anything you've seen since. Well, Mount Carmel, you glance at Elijah. He doesn't move, because God isn't in the fire either. And then a whisper, a still, small voice, not even a voice really, more like the quiet left behind after everything loud has finished shouting, like the sound of sand settling, like someone exhaling after years of holding it in. And that's where God is, right there, in the softness, in the hush, in the barely there breath that slips between chaos and calm. You both feel it, like a velvet thread wrapping around your ribs, tugging gently, not to terrify, but to beckon. Elijah stands, slowly, reverently. He pulls his cloak up over his face, not out of fear exactly, but awe, like a man walking barefoot into a place too holy to name. He steps toward the mouth of the cave. The mountain is quiet now. The wind, the fire, the quake, they're gone. But something far greater is here, not in spectacle, not in shock and awe, but in presence. You don't know how long you stand there. Could be minutes, could be years. Time stretches thin in the holy, and then the question returns. What are you doing here, Elijah? Same words, different weight. This time Elijah's reply feels less like a speech and more like a confession, like maybe saying the same thing again helps him hear it differently, helps him finally see that this alone feeling, this despair, it's real, but it's not final, because the answer God gives next doesn't come with lightning bolts or heavenly applause. It comes with logistics, a to-do list even. God tells Elijah, "Go back the way you came. Anoint a new king in Aram, then one in Israel, then find Elisha. He'll carry on your work. Oh, and by the way, you're not alone. There are 7,000 others, quiet believers, faithful ones, hidden but not forgotten. You just didn't see them." Elijah doesn't argue this time. There's no dramatic vow, no wild vow of obedience. Just a man standing on a sacred mountain, letting his heart recalibrate around a whisper. It's a holy kind of anticlimax, and somehow it's exactly enough. You sit with Elijah in the cave one more night. The stars are out again. Cleaner this time. The air is still, but not heavy, and the mountain no longer feels like a place of escape. It feels like a turning point, a soft place to stand before walking forward again. Because sometimes the loudest truth is spoken in silence, and sometimes the bravest thing a prophet can do is leave the cave. You wake before Elijah does. The cave's entrance glows with early light, just enough to see the fine layer of dust that settled overnight on your cloak. You stretch, careful not to knock over the small pile of pebbles you stacked absent-mindedly before falling asleep. Outside, the desert is still, the kind of stillness that feels more like holding breath than silence. Elijah stirs beside you, not with alarm, not with dread, just the quiet, practiced movements of someone who has finally slept without being chased by queens or questions. There's no rush this morning, no raven squawking orders, no angel prodding him with hot bread, no earthquake shaking him out of his bedroll, just the mountain and the memory of that whisper. When he stands, he doesn't announce it, doesn't say a word actually, just tightens his belt, brushes the grit from his cloak, and starts packing up his travel pouch, what's left of it. The man's been through wind, fire, and divine conversation, and yet still somehow has a functioning pouch. You briefly wonder, if biblical cloaks came with warranty plans. The first step down the mountain is small, the second cautious, but by the third, his pace is steady again. You follow, of course, because wherever Elijah goes next, it's no longer about escape. It's about return. This is the part of the story that doesn't get many flannel graph illustrations. The after the mountaintop bit. The part where the prophet who saw God in silence has to go back to the very mess he left behind. And that's where the real quiet miracle starts. Elijah doesn't return to a parade. No confetti, no eager crowds chanting his name. In fact, the political landscape hasn't changed at all. Ahab's still king, Jezebel's still throwing threats like daggers. The idols haven't magically disappeared. The altars haven't rebuilt themselves, but Elijah has changed, subtly. He doesn't carry himself like a man trying to fix everything anymore. More like someone who knows the work isn't all on his shoulders. And when he gets to the border of his homeland, just past the last ridge of wilderness, you notice something surprising. He stops, not in fear, in anticipation. You follow his gaze, and there he is, a young man, farming, not reading scrolls, not debating Pharisees, just plowing. A field with 12 oxen kicking up dust as he goes. This is Elisha. No trumpet introduction, no dove descending. Just a man doing the most mundane task imaginable, agriculture, and somehow he's the next piece of the plan. Elijah watches him for a long time, and then, in the most non-verbal mentorship invitation of all time, he walks up to Elisha, removes his own weather-beaten cloak, and tosses it gently across the young man's shoulders. No speech, no ceremony, just a dusty, holy shrug that says, "You're next." Now here's where things get interesting. Theologians still debate what this gesture meant exactly. Was it symbolic adoption, a prophetic succession rite, or just the ancient version of passing the baton minus the awkward ceremony? Whatever it was, Elisha understood it instantly. He doesn't even ask what it means. He just stops plowing and says, "Let me kiss my father and mother goodbye, and then I'll come with you." And Elijah, who has spent months craving connection, swearing he's alone, responds in the most Elijah way possible. "Go back," he says. "What have I done to you?" Which, let's be honest, sounds more like something you'd say to someone who just borrowed your lunch money than someone you just anointed as your prophetic successor. But you've been with Elijah long enough now to hear the subtext. He's saying, this isn't about me anymore. This call, it's between you and God. And so Elisha runs home, says his goodbyes, sacrifices his oxen, burns his plow, which is either deeply symbolic or deeply impractical, possibly both, and returns with nothing but open hands and big questions. He's in, and Elijah, he finally has someone walking beside him. The walk back to Israel is a quiet one, but not lonely anymore. You trail behind them now, two figures in the dust, one seasoned by fire, the other fresh from the fields. And something settles in your chest as you watch them. This is what healing looks like sometimes. Not loud, not instant, just one foot in front of the other, passing the work, sharing the road. It's strange to think how Elijah's journey started under a broom tree, begging for it all to end. And now, he's mentoring. He's walking with someone younger. He's not shouting from mountaintops anymore. He's walking through villages again, teaching, listening, being present. There are still hard days ahead, but the man who once asked to die is now, helping someone else learn how to live this calling out loud. And you just keep walking quietly behind. No whirlwind yet. No chariots of fire, just dust and footsteps, and the quiet kind of hope that grows after long naps and gentle whispers. The road ahead stretches long and quiet. It's not a dramatic kind of journey now, more like the slow rhythm of a man rediscovering what it means to simply keep going. Elijah walks with his cloak gathered neatly, sandals worn smooth at the heels. Elisha trailing close behind, still probably wondering what exactly he's signed up for. You don't blame him. There's no syllabus for prophet training, no welcome packet. Just a dusty man who's seen more miracles than meals, walking at a pace that says, we're not in a hurry, but we're not lost either. The days begin to blur into each other. You pass quiet hills, faded towns, fig trees bowed with ripening fruit. The landscape breathes a kind of sleepy faithfulness. Nothing flashy, just the same soil that's held people's hopes for generations. Sometimes Elijah talks to Elisha, sometimes he doesn't. The silence between them isn't awkward, it's spacious, a good kind of silence, the kind that holds room for unspoken things. One afternoon you pass a crumbled altar beside a dried-up stream. Elijah pauses, runs a hand along the stones. They're half buried in weeds now, but once this was a place where people gathered, called out, offered up their smoke and prayers. Theologians still debate which town this was, or whether this altar belonged to Yahweh or some other nearby deity. But Elijah doesn't seem interested in the footnotes. He just looks, then walks on. And you realize this is the work now, not just calling down fire, but noticing, bearing witness to what's left standing and what's faded, letting silence tell its own story. Elisha's learning too. You catch him watching Elijah closely, how he listens to people in the marketplaces without rushing them, how he prays under his breath without show. He's studying a man who has learned that sometimes the most prophetic thing you can do is simply be with people long enough to care. They camp outside villages now, instead of hiding in caves. People begin to recognize Elijah again, not with fear but curiosity. The wild-eyed prophet of Carmel has become quieter, maybe gentler. His beard's just as tangled, his clothes still haven't seen a tailor, but something in his posture has softened. One evening, a shepherd boy brings over a loaf of bread and some dried olives. Elijah thanks him, breaks off a piece, and hands. After Elisha without a word, you all eat slowly under a pale orange sky, while a flock of sheep bleats somewhere nearby with the comic timing of a tired kazoo. The desert wind sighs through the grasses. No signs, no wonders, just bread, companionship, a slow return to the ordinary, and yet something about this feels just as sacred as fire from heaven. One night you find yourselves near the town of Abel Meholah. It's a peaceful little place, mostly, known for good barley and better gossip, but it also happens to be Elisha's hometown. You see his face change as you approach, nervous, unsure, maybe wondering if the neighbors will say, "You left plowing for this?" Maybe wondering if he still fits here at all. Elijah doesn't make a fuss. He just nods toward the town and says, "We'll rest here tonight." They set up near a grove of date palms. The breeze carries the soft rustle of their leaves and the sweet smell of fermenting figs. You lie back, letting the sky darken into that deep, velvety blue that only happens when the heat finally gives up for the day. Elijah hums a tune under his breath. It's not one you recognize, and he only gets through a few notes before trailing off. But even that, a tune, feels like progress. The man who once asked to die is now humming lullabies to the stars. That night, Elisha asks Elijah something simple. What was it like? hearing the whisper. There's a pause, and then Elijah says, "Quieter than I wanted, truer than I expected." That's all, but it's enough. You realize then that Elisha hasn't just signed on to learn miracles, he's learning how to carry silence. Because prophets don't just declare things, they hold things. The ache of a people, the hush between hope and fulfillment, the long, quiet seasons where nothing burns, nothing quakes, and still God is somehow present. Elijah's teaching that now, without even trying, and somewhere along the journey. Maybe it's here under the palm trees, or maybe it was back at Mount Horeb. You notice something else. Elijah never asked to die again. He hasn't mentioned despair. He still walks with a limp of sorrow, sure, but it's no longer the kind that wants to give up. It's the kind that knows how to keep going, even when the world hasn't changed much, even when Jezebel is still out there, even when kings still ignore, even when altars lie in ruins. The work continues, yes, but so does the rest. The quiet, meals, the evening hums, the friendship forming in the fire's glow. Elijah, the once lonely prophet, has become someone worth walking beside. And Elisha, he's becoming someone ready to follow. Not blindly, not with fire in his eyes, but with a quiet steadiness that might just carry the story forward. You settle into your bedroll again, feet dusty, heart full. The stars blink down, gentle and wide-eyed, and the mountain feels very far behind now, but its whisper is still with you, carried in footsteps, cradled in silence, alive in the journey. You wake to the soft bleating of goats and the distant clatter of morning life stirring in Abel Meholah. The sun hasn't yet claimed the sky, but the first rosy hues promise another slow, warm day in the hills. Elijah and Elisha are already up, packing their modest belongings with the kind of quiet efficiency only long travelers know. You stretch, feeling the dust settle into your bones, and prepare to follow them once more. The day's path leads through stretches of farmland, olive groves, and the occasional fig tree, trees that have been witnesses to generations of whispered prayers and everyday miracles. Walking beside them, you notice how Elijah's gaze lingers on the land differently now. Not just as a place of conflict or prophecy, but as a home, fragile and sacred. You overhear a snippet of conversation where Elijah describes a curious custom of ancient Israelite farmers. Before planting, some would ceremonially bless their fields with water and incense, a practice scholars still debate as either early worship or simple superstition. The detail makes you smile. It's comforting in a way to know that even prophets once paused to honor the earth beneath their feet. Elisha, meanwhile, seems to soak up these moments with a quiet hunger, nodding thoughtfully, but saying little. His hands brush against the rough bark of an olive tree as they pass, and you imagine the countless stories held in those gnarled limbs, stories older than even Elijah's most storied adventures. Later, as the sun climbs higher and the heat settles in like a soft blanket, the three of you find shade beneath a lone acacia tree. Elijah pulls out a small piece of flatbread from his pouch, sharing it with Elisha and you. The taste is simple, almost bland, but somehow satisfying, reminding you of the manna stories you heard as a child. You remember the scholarly debates about whether manna was a literal food or a metaphor for divine provision. Either way, sitting here now, it feels very real. The afternoon stretches on in a gentle haze. The wind hums through the dry grasses, carrying faint scents of wild thyme and dust. Elijah tells you about the ancient broom tree itself, the very one he rested under. It's not actually a broom, but a species of acacia known for its sparse shade and resilience in harsh desert climates. Somehow knowing this makes his long nap feel even more miraculous, like finding comfort in a place so uncomfortably bare. As you watch Elisha practicing how to tie his cloak with a loose knot like Elijah's, you think about the quiet power of these everyday moments. The whispered lessons, the shared bread, the soft brush of footsteps on dry earth, all weaving a story not of loud miracles, but steady faithfulness. The sun begins to dip, painting the sky in soft pastels, and the day settles into the kind of peaceful lull that only comes after a day well walked. You find yourself sinking deeper into the rhythm of this journey, a slow, gentle unfolding that feels less like a race and more like a bedtime story told by the hills themselves. And as darkness folds around you, you realize this is the kind of holy history that makes the heart soft and the mind ready for rest. The night settles like a soft blanket, thick with the scent of wild herbs and distant wood smoke. The stars prick the sky in quiet patterns, ancient as the stories you've been tracing with Elijah and Elisha. Around your small campfire, the flickering flames dance slowly, casting gentle shadows that sway with the desert breeze. You feel a sense of calm that seems almost too good to be true after days on the dusty trail. Elijah breaks the silence with a story. Not a thunderous declaration, but a small, almost private tale. He tells you about a curious law from the book of Leviticus that many overlook. The command about not wearing garments woven of two different kinds of thread. It sounds odd, almost petty, but there's a hidden logic. Theologians still debate whether it's about ritual purity, social distinction, or something practical like the durability of fabric. You chuckle softly. It's strange to imagine prophets worrying about their textile blends amid all their divine encounters. Elisha listens intently, eyes reflecting the firelight, probably thinking how even the smallest details weave into a much bigger tapestry of faith and daily life. You glance at Elijah, who smiles softly, the weight of his years momentarily lifted by the simplicity of the tale. Then Elijah reaches into his pouch and pulls out a small loaf of barley bread, breaking it in half and handing you a piece. It's dense and coarse, not like the fluffy bread you're used to, but nourishing nonetheless, a taste of the desert's humble bounty. You remember the manna stories again, how miraculous provision often looked surprisingly ordinary. As you nibble, Elijah begins to hum a low tune, barely audible but steady, a melody that seems older than memory itself. It's soothing, like a lullaby whispered by the wind through olive branches. The tune reminds you that sometimes faith isn't about loud voices or grand gestures, but quiet moments that steady the soul. Elisha, picking up on the mood, shares a detail of his own, about how the Nabateans, neighbors to Israel, used ingenious water channels carved into rocks to survive the desert's scarcity. It's a clever adaptation, blending human ingenuity with the harshness of the landscape. Theologians debate how much these cultures influenced each other, but here, under the same sky, the connections feel real and immediate. You lean back, letting the crackling fire and gentle music lull your thoughts. The night deepens and your eyelids grow heavy. There's a strange comfort in this shared stillness, knowing that these ancient stories, these small laws and humble tunes, carry whispers of hope and resilience. The fire burns low, the desert hums softly, and you drift, cradled by the past and the quiet company of prophets who once, like you, needed rest. Unmini. The first light of dawn creeps over the hills, soft and tentative, like a whispered secret. You're stirring slowly, wrapped in a blanket of cool morning air, mixed with the faint scent of rosemary and crushed earth. Elijah and Elisha are already awake, their figures silhouetted against the pale sky as they prepare for the day ahead with the kind of calm routine born from countless journeys. As you follow them, the landscape opens up, rolling hills dotted. With wildflowers and scattered stones, the quiet hum of cicadas beginning to swell. It's a world that moves deliberately, without rush or drama, inviting you to slow down and simply be. Elijah pauses beside a weathered stone wall, tracing the marks of ancient chisel work. He shares an obscure fact. Some scholars suggest these Stones might date back to Canaanite builders, hints of a culture long absorbed into Israel's story. Theologians still debate whether such remnants carry a spiritual significance or are merely historical footprints. Either way, there's something humbling about walking where generations before you have toiled and hoped. You watch Elisha pick a handful of wild figs from a nearby bush, their sticky sweetness a welcome snack in the morning warmth. He offers. You one, and you bite into the soft fruit, tasting a blend of earth and sun. A reminder that survival here relies on nature's quiet generosity. You remember tales of the desert diet, lentils, wild greens, figs and bread, simple foods, yet sustaining enough for prophets and peasants alike. The conversation drifts to the daily routines of disciples, often overlooked in favor of spectacular miracles. Elijah speaks softly about how many spent their days walking, learning and resting much like this, their lives woven into the rhythm of the land. There's no hurry, just patient watching and listening, a kind of holy waiting that feels strangely comforting. You settle into the slow pace, your footsteps matching the gentle cadence of the hills. The sun climbs higher, painting the world golden and warm. Somewhere ahead, the faint murmur of a village stirs, a hint of human life waiting to greet you. As you approach, Elijah and Elisha exchange a knowing glance, the kind that speaks of stories yet to unfold. And you realize that even in this quiet journey, the ordinary holds its own kind of sacred wonder. With that, you move forward, ready to see what the day's gentle mysteries will bring. The village comes into view just as the afternoon sun tilts toward the west, a cluster of stone houses with flat roofs, dusty courtyards, and the low murmur of everyday life unfolding slowly. You step through narrow lanes where children chase. Chickens and women sweep their doorsteps with palm fronds, their laughter a soft backdrop to the warm, fragrant air. Elijah moves through the village with a familiar ease, greeting neighbors with a nod or quiet word. You realize that despite his reputation as a fiery prophet, here he blends into the rhythm of daily life, less a figure of awe and more a man who knows what it means to be part of a community. Theologians still debate how much interaction prophets had with ordinary folk versus royal courts, but watching Elijah now, you sense a balance between the two worlds. A local elder invites you all to sit beneath a fig tree heavy with ripening fruit. As you rest, Elijah recounts a curious law from Deuteronomy about gleaning, the practice allowing the poor to harvest leftover crops after the main harvest. It's a beautiful, almost poetic command, showing how ancient law intertwined social justice with agriculture. You think about how this law shaped the rhythms of village life, encouraging generosity and community care, not just survival. Elisha listens intently, eyes bright, occasionally glancing at the villagers around. You sense he's absorbing more than just the stories. He's learning how faith plays out in everyday moments, from shared meals to simple acts of kindness. It's not always about grand miracles, but about the steady work of building life together. As the sun dips lower, the village prepares for evening. Fires are lit, filling the air with the scent of roasting herbs and fresh bread. Elijah hums a soft tune you've heard before, the one he sang under the palms. It's comforting, a gentle reminder that even amidst journeys and trials, small joys endure. You lean back against the rough bark of the fig tree, feeling the steady pulse of life around you. The village breathes its quiet stories, and you realize that prophets, like the land and its people, are sustained by these rhythms, by moments of rest, connection, and the simple grace of being present. Night falls softly, wrapping the village and your thoughts in a tender hush. And as you close your eyes, you carry with you the gentle heartbeat of this place, the sacred stillness where faith and daily life quietly intertwine. The next morning arrives slow and gentle, with mist curling softly over the fields and the faint sound of roosters announcing the day. You're already awake, Nestled beneath a patchwork of woven blankets, the cool air tinged with the scent of wet earth and crushed herbs. Elijah and Elisha are busy preparing a simple breakfast: barley porridge, thickened with dried figs and a splash of goat's milk. As you eat, Elijah shares a story about ancient Hebrew sleeping customs, something you hadn't thought much about before. Did you know people often slept sitting up or leaning against walls? Theologians still debate whether this was practical, keeping watch for danger, or symbolic, a way of staying spiritually alert even in rest. You can almost picture Elijah dozing under that broom tree, his back resting against rough branches, eyes fluttering shut, but spirit vigilant. Elisha laughs softly at the idea, recounting a tale he'd heard from Nabatean traders about their desert camps, where sleeping mats were woven from palm fronds and nighttime chatter was a comforting ritual. It strikes you how these small, ordinary details link cultures together, weaving shared human experiences across dusty lands. The day unfolds with a gentle rhythm, walking, talking, pausing beneath shade trees. You notice Elijah's slow, thoughtful pace, a stark contrast to the fiery prophet you first met. He moves now like someone savoring each step, each breath, fully present to the world's quiet miracles. At one point, Elijah stops near a rocky outcrop and pulls from his pouch a small clay oil flask. He explains how oil was not only a cooking ingredient, but also used for anointing and healing, rich in symbolism and practical use alike. Scholars still debate how widespread these practices were among common folk versus the elite. But here, beneath the open sky, the oil's golden glow feels like a quiet blessing. Elisha watches closely as Elijah pours a few drops onto his hands, rubbing them together with a slow reverence. You feel the peaceful weight of this moment, the ancient meeting, the everyday, in a simple act of care. As afternoon light softens, you continue your journey, carrying with you the soft hum of shared stories, the scent of olive groves, and the steady pulse of a faith lived in small, sacred rhythms. The road ahead feels less daunting now, wrapped in the quiet strength of those who have walked it before you. The sun sinks low, casting long, gentle shadows over the rugged landscape. As you and the prophets continue your slow trek, the air carries the faint scent of time and dust, a subtle reminder of the land's age and endurance. You can almost hear the hills whispering secrets, stories carried by the wind for generations. Elijah pauses by a cluster of wild pomegranates, their bright red skins glowing softly in the fading light. He plucks one and hands you a segment, its tart sweetness surprising and refreshing. He tells you about how pomegranates were more than just food. They were symbols of fertility and abundance, often carved into temple decorations. Scholars still debate the depth of their symbolic meaning, but their vibrant presence in ancient Israelite life is undeniable. Elisha shares a curious tidbit about the Moabites, Israel's neighbors, who also prize pomegranates but use them in unique rituals. You find it fascinating how these cultures, while distinct, shared such common threads, a reminder that faith and daily life often intertwine across boundaries. As twilight deepens, you all find shelter beneath a large fig tree, its broad leaves whispering softly overhead. Elijah unwraps a small bundle of dried herbs and breaks them apart, releasing a calming aroma. He explains how herbs like hyssop were used for purification, medicine, and even cooking, a humble but vital part of ancient life. Theologians continue to explore the layers of meaning behind these practices, blending the spiritual with the practical. You lean back, letting the soothing scent mingle with the gentle rustle of leaves. Elijah hums the tune you've come to recognize, that quiet melody carried on the desert breeze. The night wraps around you like a soft quilt, warm and protective. In these moments, you feel a profound stillness, the kind that comes when stories, sense, and silence weave together to cradle the spirit. It's a gentle reminder that even amid deserts and hardships, there is comfort and grace in the smallest, quietest moments. You close your eyes, heart light, and prepare for the final stretch of this gentle journey through Elijah's surprisingly long nap and beyond. The night deepens into a velvet hush, the stars now thickly scattered across the vast dark sky like scattered seeds of light. You're lying on soft earth, the coolness rising gently from the ground, cradling you as the last embers of the fire flicker and fade. The world feels impossibly quiet, save for the distant call of a night bird and the soft rustle of leaves, stirred by a whispering breeze. You remember the long, slow journey, the dusty roads, the humble meals, the gentle rhythms of faith lived quietly. Elijah's nap beneath the broom tree now feels less like a moment of weakness and more like a sacred pause, a holy breath in the midst of a rugged, restless world. Theologians still debate the full meaning of that rest. Was it simply exhaustion or a divine invitation to trust and renewal? Tonight, you lean toward the latter. Your thoughts drift to the broom tree itself, a sparse, resilient plant offering shade just enough to soothe but never to fully shield. It's a perfect metaphor for life's fragile sanctuary, a place where even a weary prophet can find enough comfort to close his eyes and dream. You imagine the delicate breeze brushing through its branches, carrying soft whispers of ancient prayers and quiet hope. As you sink deeper into the calm, the scent of wild thyme and crushed earth mingles with the cool night air, wrapping around you like a gentle lullaby. Elijah's quiet humming echoes faintly in your memory, a melody that feels like an embrace from a friend who knows both the weight of the journey and the beauty of rest. Now, as you lie here, under the endless sky, you feel the steady pulse of time, the slow turning of days and nights, the ancient dance of earth and sky. There's no hurry, no need for grand revelations or dramatic moments. Just this peaceful unfolding, this gentle closing of eyes and opening of heart. So with the soft hum of the night as your companion, you drift, cradled by the timeless story of a prophet's rest, the enduring grace of the desert, and the quiet hope that lives in every gentle breath. Good night.